This right here is a 3D top view puzzle game in which the player has to stay in the light as much as he can. The game features moving and static lights, lights that you can interact with by pushing them, and red zones which can instantly kill the player and reset the game. The player receives a continuous heal while he is in the light, but when exiting the light, the health is decreasing. The player can use this mechanic to traverse to the dark areas without dying if he is fast enough. There is also a puzzle where the player has to push a ball around that emits light in order to walk through the puzzle and avoid stepping on the red zones. For the code, let's start with the player movement. That is of course attached to the player character. First of all, I have a float variable that will indicate the movement speed. In the void update function, I have made two variables, the x value and the y value, which will represent the x and y vectors that will be used for the transform.translate function. The x value and the y value are calculated based on the input if the player presses the WASD keys or the arrow keys. This is then multiplied by the time.delta_time function in order to translate the high values from the input combined with the FPS of the game into fixed values. Also, I have multiplied it with the move speed float variable to obviously change the movement speed of the player. I have learned all of this from a tutorial on game.tv, complete C# Unity game development developer 3D online course. Going to the light collision code that controls how the player interacts with the light and red zones, here, first of all, I have created three variables. A float that represents the health of the player, a health bar that will be explained in another script, and a bool variable that will check if the player is or not in the red zone. Then I have wrote a function that each time the player is in the light tag collision, he will receive instant health constantly, and if the player touches the red tag collision, he will no longer receive healing and his health will drain until he dies. I have wrote another function that is a fixed update function. I have decided that it is better to use fixed update than time.delta_time in order to fix the FPS. In this function, the player receives constant draining of the health, and if it reaches 0 or below, the game restarts. I have done that using scene manager that loads scene script. Moving on to the health bar display on the HUD, I have used a slider variable that is a component of the player HUD health bar that will change its rectangle or percent based on the amount of health the player has. In the function setHealth, the slider.value will receive the health value in order to work. This whole function is then called in the light collision script that I have explained earlier by using public health bar as a variable, and in order to call it each time, I have used healthbar.setHealth, current health in the brackets, in void fixed update. All of this was learned from a YouTube tutorial how to make a health bar in Unity. And lastly, for the moving light script, I have used a script which I have learned from a lecture that was about moving platforms. In this script I have used four variables: a boolean to check if it moves right or not, a float that indicates the movement speed, and two integers that indicate the left and right margins. They are used in a fixed update. Each time move right is true, the light will move in the x-axis in the positive, with a specific movement speed, which in our case is 0.15. If move right is not true, then the same thing will happen, but this time it will be in the negative direction. In order to change the move right values, I have an if statement that checks if the light has reached the left or right margin, changing the values of the moving right boolean.